Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where Executive Coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hi there, leaders. It's Alicia Cowan, and welcome to episode number 37 of the Executive Coaching Podcast. So we have a lot going on around the Cowan House, and I always like to start the updates in the beginning of the podcast with all the things that are happening. And what's been really cool that's happening this weekend is that my sister came into town with her husband, Dave, and their two dogs, and we're celebrating a kind of belated 40th birthday for her. Her birthday was a little less than a month ago. And so this is the first time she's gotten a chance to come down. She lives in Outer Banks, North Carolina. She came down to visit me and the rest of the family. And we are going to go to Universal Studios to celebrate. So we are all huge Harry Potter fans. And so we're going to go together and have just a really great time riding rides and hanging out in Florida and catching up. And what's another really fun thing about this visit is she's an entrepreneur as well. She's a jewelry designer and has her own jewelry designing business, and she does permanent jewelry. And so what's really fun is that she brought an entire kit of all of her stuff. So tons of beautiful chains and gems and diamonds and gemstones, all this like really fun stuff to make us all jewelry. So we are all just staring at it, designing fun bracelets and necklaces and fun stuff in our minds. And she's going to whip that up for us this weekend. So we're all pretty excited about that. My daughter, who's 14, just like her eyes went bug-eyed when she saw it all. So we are going to have a blast doing that. So that's what's going on around here. And looking forward to a really fun weekend together. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is leadership identity as a senior leader. And why this is on my mind is because what's cool about this podcast now, a little over a year in its lifetime, but I've been able to see leaders now over multiple years of my career and my coaching business, to see them as they ascend to the next level of leadership. And so I've gotten to see firsthand what happens when leaders get to the next level of leadership and need to evolve and or take on new identities as leaders at that next level. And what I've seen happen is either leaders get to that next level and they can move through it and they can understand that something different is expected of them, and that sometimes whatever skills, traits, habits, et cetera, that got them there may not always get them to where they need to be at the next level. And they recognize that and understand it. What I've seen, if people don't accept that, they get stuck. And a lot of times leaders get stuck in this mindset where they are not letting go of some of the things that they did before. They're not evolving their leadership. They're not understanding and seeing the landscape for what it is. That something when you get to a senior level leadership is expected of you differently than being an individual contributor, or even like, again, some of the not as senior level leaders. Even if you did manage people, when you get to a higher level, managing a larger team within the enterprise, there is a different set of expectations. And the people that don't adjust get stuck in some of the habits, and then they ultimately either max out at that level or decide to opt out at that level. Or sometimes take a slide and don't necessarily make the transition well. And while, of course, there's an option to come out of it and move through it, there is a way to do it a little bit quicker. So what I want to do is talk about some of those potential landmines and potential pitfalls that I have seen over the years, and to see again what can happen and what can come of it, and then what to do about it. So we'll talk about that today. So when I say that, like, you need to go into a different level of leadership and have a different leadership identity, I don't mean it in the sense of like having an identity crisis, right? It's not like you go through a situation where you become a higher level leader and you need to turn into something or someone that you're not. right? So that's not what we're talking about. What I really want to hone in on here is the difference is it's the next evolution of yourself. It's really who you want to be at that next level. And there might be some identity markers or strengths that you want to take with you that really serve you really, really well. And you want to bring them with you to the next level. Perfectly fine. What you also want to evaluate is there might be some others that even they might be strengths. It doesn't mean that anything's gone wrong, but there might be some things that you've done in the past, some habits, again, or strengths or behaviors. They may have served you well in getting to where you're at, but they might not necessarily serve you well moving forward from there. They might not necessarily align with who you want and who you may need to be as a leader at that next level. Okay. And you're probably wondering, okay, so how do I recognize them? How do I know the difference? Well, we'll get to that. We'll get talking through that. But what I really want you to think about too is that these old habits that you might have, they might pull you back if you don't take some time to evaluate where you're at. They may pull you back to where you were performing at that level before, right? So they may be like an anchor. They may anchor you down and keep you from becoming that next level leader. And I think you might have heard the saying, it's basically the saying of what got you here won't get you there, right? I think there's even a book titled something similar as such, right? But like basically in the sense of everything that got you to where you're at today may not necessarily be the key to get you to the next level. And I think that sometimes is a really hard distinction for leaders to make because of course it makes sense psychologically, right? All of these things that made me successful, why would I think that they might be a hindrance to me in the future? And so that trap, that again, it makes sense why our brain wants to tell us that. It makes sense why, of course, we want to look to our past for success. But again, past success does not indicate always future success. And it's a really, again, a conscious decision that we have to make. So there's some traps that you could fall into if you don't consciously decide ahead of time to look out for them. So again, I've coached, and at this point, hundreds of leaders. So many of them have transitioned into new roles successfully. And sometimes others have struggled. So I'm going to outline some of these things in the next list here. But I think what most people find surprising is that a lot of them at the senior level of leadership, there are mental hurdles and mental mindset shifts that we have to get through. It's not this hard skill that at times as you were climbing our corporate ladder and climbing through our leadership roles, is really sometimes those hard skills, those really tangible things that we need to build, right? And so, I coach, again, so many leaders at the senior leadership level, and it really is a mental mindset shift that we need to work through. So you'll hear me saying there's not like always these exact courses that you can go and take or this perfect silver bullet of a book that you can read and work through. It really is cleaning out mental clutter and working on your mindset as you ascend through the leadership ranks. Okay. So let's dig into it. Let's talk about some of the things that may pop up. Here's what you can watch out for here. So here's the first one. What I see leaders doing is still trying to manage and do the prior job that you had. So still trying to lead in a way that you are micromanaging and doing the work that you did before. Okay. So here's what happens. You're thinking, I can do it better than who is doing it now, or I can do it faster than who's doing it now. And because there's like this lack of control over your future, sometimes it feels like super uncertain and very unknown about what is around the corner for you as a senior leader. It feels unfamiliar and it feels uncomfortable. You want this like sense of control. And so at times leaders, they go and they go back to something familiar. And because they're so anchored in what they were doing well in the past, and they love that sense of control, completion, being able to do something quickly and accomplish it, that very well could anchor you again in the past. So if you find yourself tending to want to do the work that you did before and going back to some of those habits, examine it and decide if you want to hold on to that or not. I'll say this too. It may not always come out in the workplace. Sometimes it comes out in our home and household responsibilities as well. So at times, sometimes people are trying to hold on to household responsibilities like cleaning, grocery shopping, et cetera, and they're not outsourcing appropriately. And so they're holding on to these household responsibilities, feeling burdened and weighed down. But at the same time, because they're getting those things done, they also feel a sense of completion and control. But to operate at the next level, at times you do need to outsource or delegate appropriately within your household. Let that one sink in. So a lot of times we're trying to maintain the same level of work across the board, again, within the workplace, at home. And we really want to sink that in, because I think sometimes people separate the work at home, the work at work, and they don't think about the level of responsibility on both, and if they're trying to hold on to too much. All right. So take a look at that. Are you holding on to work that could be done by others? And why are you doing it? Again, the brain loves to go back to old habits. It loves to hold on to what's familiar, and it gives you a dopamine hit when you get that sense of completion. It feels so great to cross that thing off your list. So as a leader, if you're having to tackle something super intangible, super future focused, multi-year project type of work, at times when you have that type of work on your plate, you don't get a hit in the sense of completion. You don't get that hit of dopamine in your day-to-day work. So sometimes it feels really good to go and accomplish work that can be completed today, even if it's not your highest value work, even if it's not your most important work. So watch out for that. Okay. So just notice, am I doing work that I don't need to do? Okay. All right. So that's the first one. The second one I see, another trap that leaders can fall into, is when they get to the next level of leadership, they start to compare themselves to others within the peer set. So I compare it to this. So you're rising to this new level of leadership. You ascend to the next level within the building, right? Let's say you're going from the 4th floor up to the 6th floor, right? You get off on the next elevator, you're exiting the elevator, and you start to have this whole new group of peers at this level. And you're in a new floor of the building that you've never been in before. And you start to compare, right? So you're looking around, you're in unfamiliar territory, and then you start comparing yourself to others within this peer set. At times this can come out and feel a little bit like imposter syndrome. But what's happening here is you've got this sense of insecurity that starts to form, because we're looking around at times and comparing ourselves to others rather than being really super confident in our own abilities and how we got here. And it's normal. This is normal for the brain to do, because again, we're in unfamiliar territory. We are starting to look around and feel uncomfortable. And because we're in this new territory, when we start looking around, we start comparing, it can really lead our brains to start getting into thoughts of envy. And we got to watch out for this, right? And why the brain loves to do this, again, because we love to be parts of communities. We love to figure out quickly how we can fit in and be a part of the community. And our instinctual brain does start to look around at the landscape and do a little bit of comparison and figure out how we fit into this community. Okay. So the brain's doing, again, normal brain things. However, just notice if this happens to you. So what is a result of that? What this envy or this comparison can lead to is driving to isolate ourselves, right? So of course, if we're comparing or envious, we don't end up having a good sense of connection with people. Usually it drives us to have more of an isolation. And it can also lead to really unhealthy competition. I'm a firm believer there is great, healthy competition in the workplace. But in this situation, when we're comparing, it can lead to unhealthy competition and unhealthy comparison. Okay. And this drive towards this lack of confidence, this envy, it can also push someone into staying quiet and silent, because we're deferring again to more experienced leaders that are in the room, leaders that have more tenure than us, leaders that are more senior to us, right? we can start to defer because our thoughts about where they're at in comparison to us don't feel great. And so so the actions that we might be taking from that feeling of envy is to retreat and be more quiet and silent. So again, catch this stuff. Again, I was just coaching a leader in the past week about looking around in comparison, and rather than leaning into learning from this person or like asking for camaraderie and companionship in the workplace as a peer, they're looking and comparing and making it mean something about them and their deficiencies when no one has been calling that out to them. It's just their own brain leading to that conclusion with them. So watch out for that. Watch out for comparison. All right. So another one. So we talked about comparison. We talked about trying to take over work. The third is very clear boundaries and having amazing time management. That's the challenge. So as leaders ascend, they think, again, I don't need to make changes in my schedule or how I'm managing my time and what boundaries I'm setting. What does this look like? So again, as leaders, it's getting to the point where we're really being conscious and being decisive with our calendars and our time. I see leaders just get sloppy with their time. And what that could look like is deferring to whoever sends them an invite, whether or not it ends up on their calendar, just deferring to accept it, and leaving it to others about how much time they're allowing on their calendar. They're not deciding how to use their time ahead of time. They're just victims to their calendar. Okay. The second one, again, coaching a leader on this last week as well, not protecting their personal time. Work just starts to bleed into time that is off time, nights, weekends, and they're not using their time to protect themselves as the asset of this business. So again, as a senior leader, you are only as effective as your health, physically, mentally. You have to be healthy, and you are the asset in this business. Again, most of you, again, it's the senior leader level, are not in the work of doing manual labor. So you have to have both your mind and body healthy at the same time. And so a lot of leaders, I think, because the demands of work at the senior level of leadership are heavy, they do take a toll mentally, even if they're not physically sometimes laborious. They are mentally sometimes taxing and challenging. And I think leaders just think, again, especially in this world of remote work, at times, it can really start to bleed. It can bleed into different hours. And I see senior leaders not protecting their time, and then to include their health, and they're not protecting themselves as the asset. So really decide ahead of time. How do you want your work days and work weeks to be structured? How do you want to allow for flexibility? And how do you want to allow for the unexpected to come up? And you have to pause and do analysis in different seasons. So, whether it's once a month, once a quarter, you have to kind of ebb and flow and really look at your calendar. How did I use it in the past week or 2 weeks? Was it in a way that best served my priorities? And how do I want to make changes going forward? And again, typically I always say this, like if you look ahead for the next week or two, you probably can't change your calendar that much. But if you're looking a quarter out, a few months out, it does start to clear a little bit, and you can start to make decisions around it consciously as a senior leader. Okay. And I know what you're saying. How do I do this? There is unexpected stuff. There's things that come up. Of course there are, but you have to plan for that as well. And like I mentioned, you have to protect yourself as the asset and make sure that you have enough time to keep your body and your mind 100% healthy, because otherwise you're not going to be able to perform in this new role. So that is a big one. Clear boundaries, amazing time management. Okay. And then number 4, and I know I kind of mentioned this, but this lack of mental management, that's what really can trip you up at this level. So as a senior level, you have to have mental management as a really habitual practice at this level. What does mental management mean? Okay, well, what you have to do is realize that you have to evolve at this level. And again, what you brought with you is amazing. All the skill sets, all the habits, they're great. They got you to where you're at. And you might have to burn it all down and start over to be at the next level as a leader. So what does that mean? Well, you got to get your mind right. You have to have the ability at this level to live with discomfort, fear, uncertainty, and figure out how to lead anyway. Okay. And I know that sounds wild, but really at this level, it's how do I, even though I'm going through an unknown and new situation, how do I take that with me and still have confidence in myself that I can do this? And what that takes is a lot of a mindset shift and a mind and mental management. It's really deciding that you do have to evolve and not being afraid to. And you have to know and be open to the fact that things might have to change. Okay. And that starts with deciding who you want to be at that next level without losing what makes you truly you. And knowing that when you get to the next level of management, you start to become a senior leader and above, you have to know that it is going to be 50-50 when you get there. Meaning, at times it's going to be 50% awesome and 50% not so awesome. And I think just having that knowing that when you get to that place, some leaders I think that when they arrive at that place and they get there, that everything's going to be figured out and you're going to have it all perfectly managed. And I can assure you, friends, that is not the case. Okay. There's a lot that you do have figured out and there's a lot that you don't yet. And so by assuming that everything's going to be figured out, you're only setting yourself up for disappointment. It's perfectly normal that when you get to the next level of leadership, that there are things that are unknown and that you've got to work through. So anticipate these challenges rather than fight against them or expect them not to be there. If you know things that they're going to look different and that you can anticipate it, then you can start to head them off at the pass. Okay. So that's it, my friends. Those are some of the 4 things. These are some of the things that you can do to work through them. Again, I work through this with leaders. That is what we do. We do the mindset work to be prepared and to be ready for all those challenges you're going to face as a senior leader. So I'm happy to help. We can talk through this. I encourage you, whether it's me or someone else, get coached, get a mentor, get a community, get your own personal board of directors, as I like to say, and don't fall into the traps. Okay. Anticipate them. They're coming for you. So if you're ready for them, then you can prevent them. All right. This is a quick one, but I think an important message. If you are ascending to the next level of leadership, know there are things that you have to do to be ready. All right. If you need any help, you know where to reach out to me. It's ElishaCowanCoaching.com, ELISIAKEOWN coaching.com. And I would love to talk to you and hear from you. So as always, thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Elisha Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at ElishaCowanCoaching.com/call.